J.T. Crowley is Talking Books. On this show, you'll hear from emerging talent and seasoned veterans from around the world. They'll give you their take on the writing process and how to create the secret sauce of page-turning deliciousness. Let's get into that magical mixture of the art and science of creativity. Here's J.T. Crowley, author of The Smart Kids, and your podcast host.
Hello, I'm J.T. Crowley, and today I have another thrilling author for you all. Thomas Trese is from Fort Worth, Dallas, Texas, in the United States. He's come on the show to talk about his book, The Heroes, which was released in August 2022. The story, in brief, is a work of Christian fiction, offering the real faith journeys of ordinary people like a janitor, waitress, Uber driver, pizza delivery person, and a social worker. It shares a message of faith molded on adversity, team building, plus reveals how God gifts the chosen as opposing those who are already prepared. What does a restaurateur from Seattle and an oil field foreman from West Texas and a burnt-out Chicago cop have in common? All gathering in Nashville with 7 others to attend a Faith Hero Award ceremony organized by a Christian TV network. A spurious TV faith healer? Well, we'll find out very shortly. But first, I just want to fill you in as to who Thomas Trese is. He grew up in Michigan. He qualified there as a neurologist, moved to Fort Worth in Texas with his then family. He operated in private practice, plus he served as chief of staff at a main hospital in the area. If that wasn't enough, he was on the National Board of Examiners of Neurologists and Psychiatrists. His professional life was very exacting. However, his personal life had a few ups and downs along the way. He's currently married to his third wife, Diane, and life is a little bit more blended for him, having retired from full-time professional life some 5 years ago. He has 6 grandchildren and a young niece. Nowadays, he has readjusted his life and pursuing new ventures like writing. So let's invite him on the show to talk a little bit about himself and, of course, this book, The Heroes. Thomas Trese, come and join me on Talking Books.
Well, thank you, John. It's a real pleasure and honor to have this opportunity to talk about my book and also to meet you. You're a very interesting person yourself. So, I think you got everything right about my life history. There was more stuff, but yeah, you very wisely kept some of that out. So,
oh yeah, we've had a couple of meetings here, everybody, before we've come to do the live recording. So it should go smoothly, everybody, because we've done a few rehearsals. That's live. Now, Thomas, before we immerse ourselves into your book, would you care to tell the general audience who Thomas Trese is and how and why you penned this book?
Well, I was in private practice in Fort Worth for 38 years, and that was, men identify themselves by what they've done. I'm extremely blessed to have a blended family that is very, very well in love with each other and functional, and that's something you just can't plan on. I really enjoy my retirement. So I may have told you when I went into retirement, somebody very wise told me to go in with 4 hobbies. And so for some reason, I decided writing fiction would be good, which makes no sense because I didn't read a lot of fiction. I read newspapers and medical stuff. And but in reading all of the events, we'll call them events, most of them unseemly here in the U.S., I decided as a Christian to write a book that would point out that God is still active in the world, even in these huge issues and problems, which we see absolutely no solution for. And so I've highlighted 3 of those in the book, and we'll be talking about those in a little bit. So I started writing fiction. It took me a while to learn how to write fiction. I'm now trying to write screenplays based on some part of the book that I've already written, and embarking on a new screenplay that hopefully I'll have out later this year. And then, of course, I had to pick up steel guitar because I live here in Texas, and it's like in the Constitution, I think, that you have to like country music and play something.
Really?
Not really. Yes. No. So I do. It's right over there in my office here. And so that was great. And then I like to cook, John, and I've cooked a number of things that I enjoy cooking. What's that?
Meatloaves?
Yes, meatloaf. So, I'll tell you this rather sad. This very sad part of my life was my son was murdered about 10 years ago. And it was just horrible. Found his body. It was just a horrible experience. So my faith got me through that, and I won't go through the whole story of that. But in the process, somebody brought some hamburgers over to while you're in shock and you're just trying to get through the next hour. And it was a very nice, kind thing to do. And when I got through, you never get over, but you get through stuff like that. I stumbled across a meatloaf recipe that actually features bourbon and bacon, which I think are wonderful things to have in your meatloaf. And so I decided what I would do is to offer people in crisis, grief, in horrible situations, a hug on the side, tell them that what they're going through sucks, and offer them a meatloaf. And I never got a no on that. So I've made this meatloaf multiple times, and if we ever meet, I'll probably force one on you, John. And I've had things said to me like the best meatloaf I've ever had, and anyways. So there's that.
He's not bragging there, folks. He's not bragging, really.
No. If it's true, it's no brag. So that's a Texas thing. And lastly is travel. As we've talked, I do enjoy traveling. We were doing one international trip from Texas before the COVID. Of course, that put a dent in that. But since then, we've been to London. My wife had never been to London, so we went there, and we went to France and Italy and Norway to the fjords, and we just did a wonderful Mediterranean cruise. Anyway, so those are our hobbies, and it works out very, very well. But faith is extremely important to me, and that's why I write this book.
Okay, so let's open the book then, shall we, Thomas? The first part, Nashville, you have approximately 26 short chapters in this section. Now, we're not going to go into all the chapters, everyone, because that's not the whole idea of the podcast. The whole idea of the podcast is to give you a flavour as to what this book is about. So we'll go to some of the chapters. So as you can formulate your own opinions. If you want to know more about what's occurring here in the whole plot, the whole book, well, the simple answer to that is go and buy the book. I can't say fairer than that. So let's go to Thomas, the scenes here, which we both agree we're going to best reflect the book. So the chapters, A Day Off and Stephanie and Donnie stood out for me towards the beginning of the book. In A Day Off, you start, I quote, "On Thursday morning, the group shuffled down to breakfast. They had been flown to Nashville from 5 different locations by MLCN, the More Like Christian Network, to receive Faith Hero Awards, which came with cash prizes. They were slated to be on a live broadcast Saturday evening, but Friday was for training, but today was exploring Nashville as a day off." And in Stephanie and Donnie, a wedding reception in her restaurant. So my question to you, Thomas, is what's going on in this part of the book, the scenes and the storylines, both in Stephanie and Donnie and the first one, A Day Off? Tell us.
Well, in A Day Off, picture this, these 10 individuals, 2 from each of 5 locations in the country, have been summoned to Nashville to receive these Faith Hero Awards. And they're kind of at a loss to know why they were selected. They were nominated by people in their homes. And so they come to Nashville, and the person who's putting together says, well, tomorrow's go to Nashville and find out about Nashville Day, and then we're going to do the show later. So they meet on the first day together is a day off, where they start talking with each other, and they've already been exposed to a horrible fake faith healer televangelist, which are not that uncommon here in the States. And all the heroes have a terrible opinion about this guy, and they want to take him down. So that's the original. That happens very quickly in the start of the book. And so on A Day Off, it's a breakfast scene, and they're starting to learn about each other. You're starting to learn as a reader about their personalities and maybe some of their strengths and weaknesses, and maybe get a glimpse as to what they look like. And so that is really what's going on. And also they start to imagine, what would it be like to do a sting for this guy? Because these people have never worked together before. Even the 2 that come from each locale aren't necessarily that close to each other. And nobody has an idea of what the other person's talents are. It's kind of like putting a team together, and you've got whatever football team, whatever, you have different team members are supposed to do different jobs, and you're just dumped a bunch of people, and the goal is, put it together and do something. Well, that makes no sense unless God's involved. So that's what's going on with The Day Off. Now, on Stephanie and Donnie, Stephanie, you see, is a restaurateur from Seattle, and she's had a bad experience with men, distant father, a loveless marriage that ended. And then the second one was this gorgeous sales rep who comes to her restaurant to schmooze. Boeing is the big aircraft manufacturer in Seattle. And so he is trying to schmooze those executives to buy parts from his company and all that stuff. And so he has dinners there. She falls for him big time because she is lonely and he is her drug of choice, as they say. And so he's a real oily, terrible, lying, womanizing, drunken guy. And so he has this horrible, the wedding scene is in her restaurant. She's done weddings there before and wedding receptions. It's a beautiful restaurant, looking over the mountains, Cascade Mountains in Seattle. And but it evolves quickly, and he comes home drunk one night and hits her, and she has a sense of to just get out of that marriage. And so she comes out of it not trusting men. And so the thing of it is that a young lady who came with her is named Shelley. And she is kind of impressionable, and she runs into contact with Cody. Now, Cody is a beautiful Brad Pitt Western cowboy that's always pushing his hair back, and women are falling all over him. And so Stephanie looks, and so Shelley and Cody are starting to kind of meet each other, and some sparks are happening. And Stephanie puts Donnie's face on Cody, just saying, "Oh, this is going to happen to her, just like it happened to me." And so she starts her controlling, stalking stuff. I said too much, but there we are.
Thomas, let's go still under the Nashville segment. 2 other chapters that caught my imagination: the awards show and Day of Rest and Sharing. The awards show is set in the TV studio with a live audience. And in a day of rest and sharing, we have Stephanie and Eric talking about their early years. Would you care to fill the audience in with what's behind the storylines here?
Yes, well, as you point out, John, that we've talked before, the award show is the longest chapter in the book, and it really is a way not only for these faith heroes to get recognition for what they did in their hometowns, but also for the reader to get to know more about them. And now they find out about these stories in a synopsis, a little larger synopsis than they've seen before. So they get a feel for the problems they've been through, like church shooting, voter fraud, just a number of things, Me Too generation things in New York, and the opioid crisis in Texas. So it's a way of, again, looking at these people, finding out who they are, because then it's a lot to dump on readers, 10 characters all at once. And then Stephanie is starting to emerge as the lead character in this first part. And so, and the other thing to mention is that you've seen the book, and I think it's next to me, but there's a lacrosse on this cover of this book, my book, and it's planted in sandals. And the importance, and so that is my idea of what the awards trophy that they will receive is. And so and it points out, God, we're God's hands and feet supposedly as Christians, and so that's just a visual symbol of that, and that's important, I think, for the reader to pick up on. And also, I want to draw attention to Reverend Ted Jameson. He's the head of the board of directors for MLCN, More Like Christ Network, and he talks about at the awards show the reason for the awards, talks about faith, the different faith journeys that exist, and points out how all these people had really different faith journeys, but they all responded, and they were all examples of faith in action. And so I want the reader to understand that.
Okay.
Now, a day of rest and sharing. Shall I go on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. A day of rest and sharing. So that is the day after the award show. And now, see, the heroes have two things happening to them. One is come to Nashville, get their awards. Two is do a sting to take down this terrible guy, this televangelist. And he's going to have a outreach, 3-continent outreach to all these people that he's trying to fleece. He's going to lie to them. He's a terrible individual. I like to make my villains really bad, and this guy's really bad. And so, so this is the Sunday after the award show. His show is going to go on on Wednesday the following week. They've got to cobble this whole thing together in just a few days. And so Stephanie is nobody's asked her to do it, but she's starting to piece together how this has happened, and she's giving people roles, and they're looking at her like, who made you king? I mean, come on. And they're giving fake salutes, and she doesn't care because she's a control freak. So anyways, so Eric and Shelley are talking to Stephanie over breakfast, and Eric's a therapist, and he can see that Stephanie is really messed up in a number of ways. But so he's trying to establish rapport and hit it off with her, and makes fun of himself a little bit. And so there's something brewing there that's going to lead to something else later. And Shelley comes down and talks about her past, which is her parents were methamphetamine addicts, and they made the horrible stuff in their house, and they're finally put in prison. She's raised by her grandparents. And all of these characters have learned that the usual church situation of showing up at a church is not not a friendly place, not a safe place to talk about their hurts. And they really, so Stephanie's learned that that's not a good idea. So she goes to Alateen, which is a place that teenagers go when their loved ones, usually their parents, are addicted to drugs or alcohol. So she goes to that. And then in the course of Alateen, after you're a teenager, you graduate to Al-Anon, which is the same program for people that are connected with addicts in adulthood. And so when Shelley goes from Alateen to Al-Anon, she meets Stephanie. And Stephanie becomes her sponsor in recovery. Generally, if you want to progress, you ask someone who has been in the program longer, has a longer period of good behavior, of selfless humility, honesty, and experience to learn from, a mentor. And so Stephanie takes her on, and Shelley lays out her story and leaps praise on Stephanie, and she smiles, realizing, I don't have faith in God. I just wanted to control you. And it's just, So that's, again,
it gets complex, doesn't it?
It does. And I'm talking too much.
So let's go. What I want to do now, everybody, is to move along the book. I want to take the audience, Thomas, to the next part of the book. So we're halfway through. You head up this part of the book under the title Midland/Odessa. Again, there are a whole host of small, very creative written chapters here. Zooming and the heroes assemble intrigued me. Of course, zooming is about Cody setting up a Zoom meeting with all the heroes he had worked together in Nashville. And I'm intrigued to think, what's the Zoom meeting about? But more importantly, Thomas, can you fill the audience in a little more about the characters in that Zoom meeting? We've got Kim, we've got Monica, Luther, Martha, Danny, Mikey, Stephanie, and Shelley. And of course, Agent Watson and Warren Murphy. So we've got more characters coming in here, everybody. So my question to you, Thomas, is why the storyline here and why these characters?
So in this part of the book, Cody, who's going to be the lead character of this part, has discovered that there is human trafficking with this happens a lot in Texas, where individuals, migrants, come across the border. They come across here with nothing. They're duped to believe that they've paid a fee back in home to get here, and they're going to be dropped off, and everything's going to be great. What happens is they're handed off to people that use them in a labor situation where they're treated very poorly, given no wages, and there's no way of getting out. They're told over and over, well, you still owe me for this, and their debt goes up, they never pay it off, and they're threatened with death if they leave. It's horrible, it's in slavery. So Cody's discovered some of this in his oil and gas company he works for, and so he decides to call back the heroes. The heroes have had this one caper that they pulled off successfully, and they formed a team. And so Cody now is going to suggest to these different people to come back. One kind of an amusing thing in the beginning is that Eric and Stephanie, you may remember Eric being the therapist and Stephanie being the restaurateur. So Eric is in West Texas, where Cody lives, and Stephanie is in Seattle, and they're starting to hit it off. They actually went on a little ski trip in which Stephanie, who skis, and Eric, who doesn't, sort of got together. He's a bumbling guy. He fell down a lot, and she, was laughing at him and stuff like that. But anyway, so they're getting closer. So he invites, Eric wants to invite Stephanie down so she can go to a rodeo and get a little closer to her. And he's unaware, I think, of Cody's experience at work. So Cody makes that happen. Stephanie comes down, goes to her first rodeo, which is a big deal here in Texas. And it's kind of, I find it funny. I think most people in Texas would find it amusing, and maybe people from other parts of the world, because it's a strange event. Anyway, so that happens. And then after the rodeo, the three of them get together and say, there's this thing going on. What about calling the team back, putting the band back together? And so that's the impetus for the Zoom. And at the Zoom, so it's always done with law enforcement, John, law enforcement that is appropriate for the task, appropriate for the task. And in this case, it requires the FBI, and there's an Agent Murphy, the local FBI chief there, who will be involved, and Texas Ranger Field Major Jorge Gonzalez. Pardon my frog here. So in Texas, there are these 150 Texas Rangers that have particular law enforcement responsibilities in sections of the state, and they are very high up in terms of respect and jurisdictional authority. And so the two of those two organizations need to work together with the heroes in order for them to not violate and not be looked at as a vigilante thing, group. And so they're on the Zoom, but also are heroes. And so you're going to see Luther, who's an African-American, strong, silent type. He doesn't say a lot, but whatever he says is usually perfect. Stephanie, who's the conniver. Cody, who's Brad Pitt lookalike, who struggles with fentanyl addiction. Eric, the puzzled, bemused therapist, who's has insight but is bumbling. Monica, an Italian-American social worker in her middle ages, who has a heart of gold and sees people in jams and just has to help them. And she has a little dog named Pookie, a miniature schnauzer, who has a secret weapon, which will be revealed later. There's there's Danny, the tough guy, the Mexican-American, who came from Juarez, Mexico. In childhood, they went up to Chicago. His family did, to put the Mexican restaurant together up there, and he became a cop. He had a friend who was shot in front of him, and anyways, he has an anger issue, and he takes it out in one of the events in his life later as a cop. He's a huge Chicago Cubs fan. And so Mikey, his son, wanting to impress his dad, is also a character. He's in his 20s. Both my father and son are big Cubs fans, and Mikey plays baseball very well to impress dad, and so they're kind of linked. Then you have Shelley, who's another kid who's linked to Stephanie, her sponsor, and Kim, who's
so there's a whole host of characters here, isn't there? This is what we're trying to get. There's a whole host. Characters, everybody here.
Yeah, and they're all on Zoom. Yeah.
Let's go to the heroes assemble. Now, this is a very short chapter, so briefly, Thomas, what's going on here?
Well, when they assemble, when they come together, it's important to realize all these people have real jobs and lives at home, and away from these capers. And Cody in this chapter takes the lead and reminds Stephanie to sort of back off. She's not going to run the show this time. And ironically, though, since they're going to confront not only labor trafficking but sex trafficking, and Shelley is the youngest female that could be used as a honey trap sort of sex kitten to sting John. She's asked to play that role, and Stephanie is asked to play her handler. Many times when not only young men can be involved in this also, they are brought to the place they're going to be put in the room and perform multiple sex acts a day. They have a handler that makes sure they don't run away. and they are not very nice people, and they usually, and it's a whole long, many ways they can be involved, many backstories there. But at any rate, so Stephanie is going to play her chaperone or her handler, which is kind of ironic because she's already been told you're too controlling for Shelley in real life, but now she's going to be asked to do that. So that is basically what's going on there.
So let's go, as you see everybody, it's the plot. It really is building up everybody. The twists, the turns, and the mire that some of these characters get themselves into is just unbelievable. But I want to go to now, still under Midland and Odessa part of the book. There were a couple more chapters that intrigued me. And one that stood out for me was Rooster. And the other one was Setting the First Trap. Now, in Rooster, we have Cody ringing up Rooster Jenkins, asking him to come over to his place. Rooster's initial thoughts are, oh, what the heck has Cody got himself into this time? And in Setting the First Trap, well, I'll let you spill the beans as to what's going on here. And of course, initially when you think of Rooster, both of us agreed, we both thought of, a Rooster Cockburn, John Wayne. Perhaps that's why I picked the chapter, but it's a really good chapter, everybody. So what's going on in these two chapters here?
Well, again, it's when you're reading a novel or you've seen a movie, you have to have a little comic relief or so Rooster is the character, much like Gladys was in the first. Gladys was Stephanie's sponsor, and she's a real character also. But Rooster, he's getting close to retirement. He's a plumber. He's a recovering meth addict. Big old mustache. Wilford Brimley. Many people don't know who this guy is, but he was the perfect scruffy, lovable, old oaf kind of guy, and that's who Rooster is. And so it's a Friday night, and Cody calls, and Rooster's been Cody's sponsor, and when he went into NA, Narcotics Anonymous, for his fentanyl addiction. And so Friday night, your sponsor calls you. Oh my God, he's in jail? What did you do? Who did you sell to? What did you do? Where did you wake up? What are the charges? I mean, it's just, and he says, well, then he explains his what he had done. And as you know, John, having read it, Cody was trying to set up the sex sting operation and went up to this room in this guy's, this man who works in his oil and gas company has been fired, and he's decided to make up the money by making a sex hotel in his upscale neighborhood in Midland. Midland is a rather wealthy community. And so he goes there, and he goes in one of the rooms to pretend. So he pretends to be a client, and he goes up there, and there's this young lady naked, tied to the bed, drugged out on fentanyl. The street name for that is Apache, or was at any rate when I wrote this book. And so there's a dish of the Apache there, and he's telling her, look, I'm not going to have sex with you. Don't worry. This is not anything. She can barely understand it, but he takes an Apache and takes it himself, which is a big major slip in this program. So he felt real guilty about it. And that's why he calls Rooster. When you slip in your program, whatever it is, you're supposed to call your sponsor. And then you generally go to the recovery meetings and get a desired ship again, whether it's alcohol or drugs or gambling or sex or whatever it is. That's part of the program is rigorous honesty. So that's the whole reason for him calling Rooster. So he calls at night. Cody comes over, crashes on the couch. Rooster gets up in his underwear, makes coffee, and then they go to this place they used to go to where they would share their lives. And they order breakfast and it comes. And then, as I told you before, John, Rooster's prayer, I like it because it's short, sincere, to the point. God doesn't need you to go down 27 things, or you don't have to impress him with your faith or your biblical knowledge or your fancy words, or and that's what I liked about that. It's very, very honest. Now, setting the first trap, Cody's assigning the roles for this sting, and Monica agrees again. So Monica is again the Italian American. She's from Queens. She's a social worker, and she, in the first part, played the role of a patsy who was calling in to donate money to Reverend Mike Tillotson's ministry. And that's important because, and they, of course, take her money and do something very illegal with it. And that's important to get the FBI involved because it's out of state, it's cross state borders. And the same thing she's going to do here in this part. So Monica's going to play this social worker in Washington State this time, who has discovered Shelley and decided that she would be a good sex slave. See, the way that some of these young kids get involved in this horrible sex trade is they are wounded, they're vulnerable, and they're picked up on by unscrupulous people. Now, sometimes the unscrupulous people are pastors, sometimes they're police officers, sometimes they are social workers and therapists even. And so Monica is one of these dirty social workers, supposedly her character is, up in Seattle or Washington, whatever. And so she's going to call down to at the point where the man is going to buy Shelley, and she's going to exact a fee from him, which again would represent an offense the FBI would say grace over. So that's why it was really, really important to get her into the picture. Stephanie is asked by Cody again to be her handler, and she says, this is a little weird based on what I've done before, and he says, well, it's part of your therapy. Think of it that way. And at the end, she goes out with Shelley to pick out sexy clothes, just ridiculously. Those shops that you never go into, but you know where they are in your town. They're going there to get the wear.
Fits.
The scanty wear.
Do you know what, everybody? There's 208 pages in this book, but as you can see, they are packed. The story is absolutely phenomenal, and it's packed. Now, there are 3 parts to the book, so we're going to go to the third part, and that's headed on to Chicago. The third and final part of the book, and the shortest part. What you talk about in the chapters, the 4 points, was food for thought. But Bureau Chief Lindy Weathers' character, now she's a tough lady who doesn't like civilians getting involved in string operations. These chapters, they're very short scenes, so briefly, can you tell us what is the background to these chapters, this storyline here, the scenes here?
So, John, the 4 points is the name of the hotel that Danny picks to summon the heroes. Now, again, from a reader's standpoint, you're going to realize you already know about these characters at this point, and you know what they do. They get together and they do wonderful things. They have adventures, and they've already done 2 of them. So you kind of have an idea that, okay, so what's going on here? So this time, the goal is to prevent a race riot. And Danny encounters that on the way to a Cubs baseball game. And there's black and white groups screaming at each other, looking like they want to kill each other, calling all racial epithets you can imagine, going back and forth. And so the riot is starting to break out. So he decides to call, who are you going to call? You call the heroes back in. And so the 4 points is a hotel. And John, as we've mentioned before, hotels are important in this book because it's a place where they assemble. It's a place where they have meetings, where they have Zoom meetings with law enforcement, where they cobble together their plans. They go online and find out information that they need to make sure that they're doing things correctly. It's just a whole range of things, and so so that's kind of what they're doing. And these are all like the Sheraton in Nashville is a real place. I believe the Ramada in West Texas, and the hotels aren't that important, but just to point out, I try to make the things realistic where you can say, that really happened. So, and Bureau Chief Lindy Weathers, you mentioned that she's a tough lady. She's
a
very
tough lady, isn't she?
Tough
she's
lady.
A very tough lady.
As we've said, you don't get to that position in law enforcement, particularly FBI, without being tough. I mean, you're going to hear every obscenity, every racial epithet you can imagine. There's going to be people that are backbiting you, saying you only got that job because you're a woman and a black woman. There's that sort of stuff. And you've got to have a thick skin on you, but you still recognize that what you want to do is to uphold the law and to make sure it's followed. And this lady has raised she's a single mom, raised two sons that are now their teens in the south side of Chicago. South side of Chicago is not a pretty place. It's, most cities have whites live here, blacks lives here. Well, in the south side of Chicago, there's some terrible gangs and some terrible things that go on. Most of the shootings that you hear about in Chicago are there. And so she has gotten herself out of there with her sons. And so she's calling the shots, and she doesn't need anybody's permission to call the shots. She's going to tell them, and she's going to tell Danny. Danny is a tough guy, but not like this woman. So he's brought this before her, and then she is going to direct them on what to do, pointing out, as you say, citizens aren't invited into these things. It's very unusual. Private citizens can get in the way, and you're not going to be given any weapons. People say, "Oh boy, we get to shoot people." No. And so you're going to help us. You are going to help us enforce the law. And the interesting thing is, when the FBI or police are out there in one of these riots, they really can't do anything until somebody gets shot. They cannot intervene until injuries or death happens. It's insane. But that's because, protest, right? In the UK and the US, it's respected, it's honored. And who's to say what's peaceful and not peaceful? And who's to say what's just passionate and not abusive, right? So that is kind of what they're dealing with there. So let's see here. Yeah, and Danny wanted to point out to Lindy that this group was not a vigilante group, and that they would abide by their supervision.
And not mess up her investigation.
Exactly. Yeah.
And finally, Thomas, let's go to the teams are set and Willie Jackson, those two chapters. In the teams are set, you kickstart the story off by Danny calling Chief Weathers. And in Willie Jackson, the TV interview. Where are you taking the readers with these two little chapters towards the end? But don't give the game away. Just very, very briefly, where are you taking us here?
Well. So the team's being set. So Danny's dealing with being away from the action. He's been informed by Lindy Weathers that he's not going to be down on the street there with the other heroes. There's going to be 8 of them down there, and he's going to be back here. And Danny then asks for Mikey, his son, to be with him, because Mikey's the IT person in this group. He's the one that can communicate, get everybody together, knows how to put in the digital images and sound in a way that's recoverable later. So he needs to work. And so it's another situation where Danny and Mikey can work together, which is very big deal in their lives. So Danny's, he wants to be in on the action. Cops just want to be down there where the rubber meets the road, and so he's disappointed. But then in the Willie Jackson chapter, he's watching TV as the race riot continues to evolve and expand and worsen over the few days. And so they interview this angry black man on the riot, and he's saying, it's always been this way: white man killing black men for no reason, just driving in your car and you're guilty, and just shooting us for no reason, and it's terrible. And this one cop wanted to beat me in the head and fractured my skull, and he's pointing to his skull. There's a scar there with an indentation indicating he had a skull fracture, and it's taken. And Danny's watching this, and he realizes he was a cop that beat Willie Jackson, 25 years ago, when he was a cop. He was a fresh cop, a rookie cop in Chicago, and he had just gone through, not just, but years ago, he had gone through the horrible tragedy of seeing his only friend, another Mexican-American kid named Jose, who was playing sandlot baseball across the street from their school, get shot and killed by a drive-by drug thing. It happens frequently. And so he's shot and killed, and he's just devastated. And he runs after that, he runs into Officer Alvarez, who is his mentor, and he gets into police work basically because he wants to be like Officer Alvarez. But what happens is that when Danny is young, in his early in his police career, he comes across a shooting, and there is a dead body on the ground and the smoking gun, and Willie Jackson comes along and picks up the gun to look at it, and he hasn't done a thing wrong, but he's just investigating. And of course, Danny comes along and assumes that Willie is the killer, and he beats him in the head into a coma. And so and Danny was never reprimanded. It was never discovered out. There was no complaints. So Danny's had all this guilt in him. And then there's the man who he beat on TV. And so at that point, he knows he's got to commence, and he talks that over with Officer Alvarez.
So you see, everyone, this book is action-packed. Now, you describe, the description of your book, you say that The Heroes is the work of Christian fiction with stories of real faith journeys. And when you look at the cover of the book with a wooden cross and, with a white cloth draped across it, I was interested as to why that image. But my question to you really is, if you were on a book signing an event and someone picked up your book and asked, what's the underlying Christian aspect to this book? How would you answer them?
It's basically faith in action.
And would they see your viewpoints?
Yeah.
How would they answer? Yeah. Would you see your viewpoints?
Well, I hope they would see that these are stories of faith in action. And I think that the cross, the risen Christ here with the robe over the cross, meaning he's risen, in sandals that we would wear. So, we can be actors, ambassadors for Christ to doing things. And so, but it takes the things that we are called on to do, as these heroes are enormous, very scary, improbable, borderline miraculous. And so that's not done without God and without faith. It's kind of like the people in Ukraine or Israel who are going into battle, and they're going house to house, and they don't know that they're going to be killed. there's going to be an airstrike. You're in this battle, and you're just going ahead, and you're hoping, you're praying to God, let me do my job, but don't, protect me, protect my family. And there's so many, John, examples of true faith heroes in our world today. Think about all the healthcare workers during COVID who risked their lives going to work, risked their families' lives, because if they came home with COVID and gave it to them, they could die. This is before any vaccines or anything else, who had to work multiple shifts because they couldn't get people in, and they were terribly understaffed. These men and women had to be at the bedside of individuals who were dying from COVID, who could not be comforted by their families because of isolation procedures. It's just astounding to think about those folks, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to write a book like this, is to champion those folks, those real life faith heroes that exist all around us.
So that's the book, everyone. But I'm intrigued to know if Thomas has got any more books coming down the line. Any more stories?
Well, yeah, John. So I've thought of the heroes being sort of the initial work that could lead forward to more adventures with the heroes, or you could go backwards and do prequels, do the background stories. I've written basically all the short stories, the 5 short stories that led to this novel, and that could be released. I'm also trying to turn the first part, the part in Nashville, into a feature film, or perhaps TV streaming event. So I've learned to write a screenplay on it, and so that's being looked at currently. And then behind me, I've got that's my storyboard for writing screenplays, and I've got another one that I'm writing now in the process of putting it together. It's about the abortion issue and a young lady who's a piano prodigy. It's called the Orphan Prodigy, and I think it's interesting. It's it's tremendously. It's great in retirement to find something that you're really passionate about.
There you go. There are things coming down the line, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know, Thomas, who do you see reading your books? And more importantly, who would you like to see reading your books?
I would like to see people who have been, as I said before, faith heroes themselves, maybe see themselves in some of these people, and see them receiving recognition and accolades on their very courageous things that they've done. Certainly, Christian, I would assume if you just look at this book and it's got a cross on it, a Christian would say, "Oh, that might be interesting," and someone who's not might say, "I'll never read that." And I would like Christian. I'm thinking middle age. I think you need to be 30 or so before you can understand how you get to this faith, because this faith isn't stuff that you learn in church and you never had any problems and you just go do something, historic, heroic. So I think somebody in their 35 to 55, something like that age group. Women, of course, read more than men, so probably that. And not just Christians, but also non-Christians, people who are looking for a reason to believe in Christ.
Fair enough. Where can people get your books from?
Well, I have a website that is the-heroes-book.com. And on that, you'll see the book. There's a little blurb about the upcoming Texas Book Festival next weekend. We'll be taking that down after that weekend goes by and putting something else up in there. And there's the synopsis of the book that you can find on the back that you read. And at the bottom, if you go down, you can buy it in three places: Amazon Prime, and Barnes and Noble, and Westbow Press. My publisher is Westbow Press, and they have an online bookstore, so you can buy the book those three places for sure.
Thomas Trese, thank you very much for giving me the wonderful opportunity to interview about yourself and your book, The Heroes. I'm JT Crowley. Thanks for listening, watching, wherever you are in the world. Until next time, stay safe.